back, everybody, for another session of Humans of HR, where we are in conversation with Mr. Chan Narayan. And the last episode was very interesting because we were talking about employee engagement. And the first type of employee engagement that we focused on in the last session was the real engagement. And how do we go about designing it? Now, today, we have decided to focus on something uh, that's a buzz. You walk into any campus, anywhere there is a group. One thing that comes to the fore is the culture. Okay, what is the culture of an organization? And that tends to become the fabric that holds everybody together. So today we're going to be focusing on cultural engagement. And the first question, Chief, is how do you define this? We understand culture. Um, we would surely like to know, how do you define the culture of an organization? And what do you mean when you say there is something called cultural engagement, which kind of ties people together, aligns people together as part of an organization? All yours.
Thank you, Harish. So, to set the context, and I'll respond to that question, but to set the context, the last conversation we had was about what you do with respect to work. How do you do the basics in terms of how you've designed the role, whether you've created this safe psychological space to ensure that people are at least satisfied. If you've not even done all of that, then whatever else you do is meaningless because there is no engagement. So the fundamental thing is the work for which people are getting together in your organization. And unless you are kind of very intentional about it, you will lose people right from day one when they don't like their work. So I think that was the previous context. Today, I'm going to talk about one of the most powerful ways through which to create engagement in organizations, which I think in most cases is either underutilized or it is there is an adversarial relationships that most organizations create that goes against the grain, that actively creates disengagement for people. And as we delve deeper into this, we will see the immense potential in certain things that we've not even thought about. And so this is going to be a great insight for people who are looking at, who want to look at employee engagement with fresh eyes and not just the conventional ways. There are different conventional ways. One looks at, cognitive engagement, and one looks at, social engagement. One looks at behavioral engagement. But to my mind, those are fairly superficial ways of looking at it. Now, to respond to what you asked, to me, culture is anything that helps human beings come together and stay together. There is both a mechanism which helps people to group together, and it helps them to stay together over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want to talk about today is that what are some of the things that can be done by the HR professional, by the leadership, by the founders to actively consider all the facets and choose very consciously which one of these would they want to bring in and play with in their organization. There are a lot of opposing tensions within organizations, and one of these has to do with culture. How much of strictness do you have? How much of flexibility do you have? And where do you position your organization, and how do you position it? What are the organizational mechanisms that either take it more towards being very rule bound to becoming more flexible? So, and there are multiple such polarities that the organizational space has to work with. And so to each their own. Something works for somebody, it doesn't work for somebody else. And that's where the creativity and the alertness and the skills of the HR folks come into play. The last point that I want to make here is that the one clear pattern that I see is that the Western cultures, and therefore also organizations that are multinationals rooted primarily in the West, whether Europe or the US, they seem to, and particularly more so European organizations, they tend to draw a fairly distinct line between the personal and the professional. And that's fine. I think that's what their culture is about. The Eastern cultures, including India, doesn't have that very clear line between the personal and the professional. And therefore, some of the interventions, some of the things that you do with respect to creating engagement to a Western audience, to a Western culture, would be crossing the line a little bit or quite a bit onto the personal space. But you do that in India, and you will find people will respond very positively most of the time. And so one has to be very thoughtful and very clear about how far do they want to go in that space, and um, where do they want to draw a line, if at all. And so as I start giving you at least 10 spaces here that I'm going to be talking about.
Before you talk about the 10 spaces, the one rudimentary question that comes to my mind is why is it that the default culture that sets in is never the culture that the organization wants? Why is it so?
So again, the answer is very simple. We've evolved, and the evolutionary design that is incorporated in all human beings, that's the reason we survived and did reasonably well as compared to other mammals, is or other life forms. Well, actually, it's the ants whose biomass kind of far exceeds anybody else's biomass, is what I understand from E.O. Wilson, but the famous naturalist. But I guess we can say that the human beings have done reasonably well in terms of surviving. And one of the key reasons that they've been able to survive is because they banded together. The culture so the design that we have of our minds, that is through evolution, is that we work very closely, and we live and work very closely with each other. Of course, as hunter-gatherers for...
That was his survival mantra, basically.
Yeah. And so if an organization leaves a gap, they don't specify, they don't make efforts in terms of building their culture, in terms of laying the foundations of their culture, in terms of drawing boundaries for their organization, a default culture will take place based on the members of the team that you have in place at that point of time. So you have somebody in a senior role or leadership role or in management who's very patriarchal. You will build, the default culture will become a patriarchal culture. And then you can keep fighting it later. It will be very difficult to change or remove. And so when you leave that space, unknowingly, most of the time, something will come in that vacuum, because that's what brings us to, that's what is needed to bring us and keep us together as human beings. And so that will take root. And then
okay, so
very difficult.
If I was to summarize this piece for entrepreneurs or humans of HR in a smaller setup or a new setup, it is important to design the culture, something that aligns with the goals of the leadership, the goals of the organization. If not, the default culture gets hardwired, and then it's always uphill task. You're always fighting a demon, and most of the times unknowing the source of the demon.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why designing the culture, um, designing the roots and elements of the culture during inception becomes extremely important for the leadership and the HR.
Oh, absolutely. And let me also point out, in all fairness, not all default cultures are dysfunctional. Some of them could be really good. Problem is not with the functional part of it, because any default culture will have at its core, how do people engage with each other, how do they work together with each other. So a large part of it is going to be functional, but the problem parts are the ones which are dysfunctional for the purpose of the organization.
True. I mean, even from a mathematical perspective, the probability of randomness being
That's right.
exactly right
Yeah.
is way lower than something that we design kind of serving its purpose.
Yep,
Right.
brilliant. Also, it's not enough for the founders to think about what kind of a culture they want to have. Which founder doesn't want an utopia in terms of culture? Doesn't happen. You need to go to it. You need to build it with a lot of wisdom, a lot of understanding, a lot of patience, and a lot of things that you need to do in order to be able to build that. So it's not a kind of a side effort. Because in a startup, for example, the founders are more focused on building the business, on kind of getting enough money in the door so that you meet this month's payroll, for example, if you're not funded. Or if you're funded, then you're more bothered about doing what the investors want you to do, which is to scale it up big time in zero time, probably, which is again very difficult. And so it is a kind of and the problem that most organizations face is that the kind of capability, skill, wisdom, understanding, knowledge that you need in the role which is creating and holding this piece together is way too costly for a small organization to bear.
Great.
And it's not showing, and since it doesn't show a very clear linkage between either revenues or scale in the initial period, both investors and founders find it difficult to
Because
invest.
you can't put a number. It's an intangible that we're trying to equate.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So the opportunity cost is not visible. Is not, you can't calculate. It's there's a way to say that. I'm not. Uh, you took one path. You don't know what the other path could have been.
Mm.
So there is no way that you can calculate what you've lost out on because
And we also try to evaluate the other path only when this path fails.
Hmm.
The path that we've taken, if it's working fine, you don't even
That's correct. You don't
invest thought
recognize
about.
it, realize.
Right. So if you're thinking about had I taken that path, that very clearly indicates that the current path seems to be heading towards a tough phase.
Hmm.
Right. So bringing the conversation back to the 10 points that you wanted to mention on cultural employee engagement.
Yeah. So I think to begin with, so as I said, we are all wired for coming together as a community. Now, when you look at, and so here, tribes are very important because they continue, and especially the hunter-gatherer tribes, because they continue living in the ways that we have done for millions of years through our evolution. It's only in the last 100, 200, 300 years that you started living in an industrial society. And before that, maybe if we look at Gobekli Tepe and say that, okay, we had an agricultural civilization 12,000 years back. Maybe it's only the last 10,000 years that we've actually come away from hunting gathering, as compared to millions of years, at least 2 to 3 million years, that we were hunter gatherers. And so, what is deeply built into our minds and in our bodies is very difficult to. It wouldn't have changed significantly.
It's hardwired.
It's hardwired. It's kind of hardwired. It's not really hardwired. It will change as we evolve. And to give an example, the adrenaline cycle that we have, when we feel vulnerable, we suddenly kind of we start sweating. We kind of have numbness in the. That's because the adrenaline hormone, which and this thing is called fight or flight response of the body, very useful for the hunter gatherers, and absolutely completely problematic for today's for example, performing arts folks, or a test taker. You see the test and suddenly you don't know what happened. When you come out, you say, I don't know what I did. I had prepared so well for it. So adrenaline cycle is something which we've inherited, and there's nothing much that we can do about it. We have to bear it and live with it, learn to live with it smartly. And there are therefore these other pieces. So let me take you through some of these. And as I start speaking, you'll see the logical connection. One of the first things that is very relevant for organizations is this transition of in tribal societies. You have these customs and you have these practices, and every society has a different one, every culture has a different one, where the transition from childhood to adulthood happens.
Correct.
Now, some
The
culture
coming of age rituals.
coming of age, yeah. So there are a lot of rituals around that, and some of them are kind of really harsh and toxic. And in today's context, maybe they had a relevance in that tribe's past, but we don't know. Today, it's difficult to look at these and not feel kind of shaken. Some of them are good. They're still slightly relevant today. The thing is that most organizations choose to do nothing. When a young person comes into their organizations, joins them as their first job. Now, in today's economically driven societies, that's the transition from into adulthood, right? You become financially independent. And yet, is there a threshold? Is there a threshold crossing ritual, event, thing that as an organization we do? Very few do. The best example that I can think of is the Marines. The first 100 days for the Marine recruit is the most difficult period. And apparently, I understand out of 100 people who are selected through a very difficult process, only about 30 make it, is what I understand, to the end of these 30 days, because it's an enormous amount of rigor and willpower, and you name it. You have to really struggle to survive. But once you cross that threshold and you become a Marine, then you will wear that badge as your primary identity throughout the rest of your life. So think about it, how powerfully it has impacted this person's psyche and this person's future sense of self. So maybe the armed forces do it. Some part of it can be dysfunctional. The same effect can be created in different, more humane ways, perhaps. I'm no expert on that, but I suspect so. If we apply thought, and if we are more creative with how we do it. What I want to observe is that there are two ways in which this threshold event is treated by organizations. One is where you create difficulties and troubles, and you make it a kind of accomplishment that is very difficult to succeed in. Now, some of these, for example, the selection as an Indian Administrative Services officer, you do this marine training before you get selected. Yep. And so the fact that it was very difficult to accomplish in itself makes it very valuable. Now, China is supposed to have had a formal professional administrative services 2000 years back. And so they also have this kind of a extremely rigorous mechanism, which makes the students learn things which are absolutely useless. Why? Even the Indian administrative services needed, when it was the Indian civil services, the Britishers, and for a little bit of time before the Indian constitution came into play, they had to clear exams in Greek and Latin. It has no use, and yet they had to kind of spend an enormous amount of time and effort in being able to clear those subjects in to become an ICS officer. So the difficulty and adversity that you set up, across which a young person has to transition successfully, to be recognized as a member of the tribe, in itself creates huge engagement. There is another way too. A lot of organizations tend to be moving that way, which is you create that as a very pleasant experience. You get flown in, then there is this, for the first 15 days or a month, you're put up at a luxurious resort or a hotel. Every need is taken care of. A lot of people will come to you. You'll get a lot of gifts. You'll get a lot of goodies, so to say. Makes you feel really good. Makes you feel, wow, I've arrived in life. And so that's another way of engaging. Interestingly, when the experience, you set it up as a negative experience, there are two types of engagements that happen. One is the bonding with the colleagues, with your cohort. And the other is respect for the organization, because, if this was so tough, then, to be a member of this group means that you got to be really tough and you got to do worthwhile things, etc. So the connect with the organization as well as the connect with your senior colleagues and your cohort is very high. When you, however, kind of pander, and how when you kind of treat people with kid gloves, and you kind of set up the induction in a way that they feel absolutely on top of the world, the honeymoon period, as it is called, then your bonding is a one-on-one with the organization, not as much with your cohort, because it's the organization that is treating you really nicely. So you feel obliged to kind of respond to the organization. So there are very different ways of, I'm pointing out that there is a continuum. You can have both. What's preventing you from having both? You have the marine the qualifier, as well as, treating you really nice.
I mean, this conversation is reminding me of one of Simon Sinek's talks, in which he talks about, because uh, what's coming out to be very interesting is we're talking about coming of age for the ones who are joining the workforce, and especially in the current generation, a lot of them are from very nuclear families. Many of them are the only child, and many times they come from an effort assessed environment where it is their input, their effort that gets counted. I mean, we can always pull the child aside and say that, I know you put in the best of efforts. I know. I mean, so it's okay. But then when they come to the workforce, suddenly the equation changes, because it's not the effort that's counted anymore. It is the result that's getting counted anymore.
Yeah.
So the parameters on the basis which people are being assessed has changed on its head.
Yeah.
And that's when the coming of age test.
Mm,
That is the coming of age test,
mm,
practically, from moving from the input assessment,
mm.
the effort assessment, to the outcomes assessment.
Yeah.
I think that's a big change, and I think that's where the culture of the organization plays a huge role. Would you like to throw some light on that?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. So Simon Sinek talks about transition from school to work. He says now no longer your parents can no longer go fight with the teacher and get you an A grade, and so on. So uh, he also points out that it's a complete reversal, as you said, turns the world upside down for these young people, and they have no mechanism to cope with it. They have no prior experience to cope with it. And so again, my point here is that whatever an organization, the organization needs to have a conscious strategy around it.
Hmm. They have to be at least aware of the fact that there is a need.
That's right. And they need to figure out what works for them in their context. Should they have something or not? That's a call that they need to take. How much of what should they build in is another call that they need to take. And it has to be both relevant to the work that they do. It needs to be kind of relevant, or it needs to be acceptable in the social norms of the community in which this organization exists. You can't have stuff that's not acceptable um, in the community that you're trying to do in your organization, within your organization. And there are some dysfunctional practices that I think exist informally, maybe. No, you will have these consulting firms who might have a kind of during the initial phase, who is a tanker, who can drink the most. They will have contests like last man standing or something like that after tequila shots. Beats me, it does probably more harm than any good, both within the organizational context and in the community that sees them behaving like this. The fallouts of this, they can be pretty serious. Somebody could get behind the wheels, end up in a bad accident, or even if there are people who are looking at how you're behaving, how you're losing it in public after getting completely sloshed, is not good either for these young individuals. You're sending them all the wrong messages. It has to be a thoughtful, very well thought out, very conscious strategy and an effort
Mm.
in terms
Mm.
of what you would want to do with it. Now, of course, most organizations will end up ignoring it, saying, "What do I need to do? I'm not here for this." But hey,
This
that
leads to that.
yeah, that's what is the innate vacuum, and therefore that's what will things. That's where the default culture will step in. That's
Mm.
where, in Japan, you go with the boss from the office to drink wine or whiskey till the boss is left.
Drinking, you continue drinking.
So I would think that's a default culture.
So, before we go forward, I think the cultural employee engagement in itself is going to spill into multiple episodes by the way things are playing out. My
Actually,
question
yeah,
is,
sure.
um, as you rightly mentioned, that most of the literature for employee engagement or HR practices um, is many times from the West.
Hmm.
Okay. So when we're talking about cultural engagement, um, we don't have any benchmarks uh, about any form of engagement that people associate with
Hmm.
um, by rooting it to the culture of the land.
Hmm.
Like you spoke about Japanese culture. The Japanese culture, I think many times the bosses overextend their reach in the life of their subordinates. starting from making sure that they're married, they're settled, they're taken care of, da 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 da. Now, for a culture that's as old as ours, we don't seem to have a defined benchmark, and making it all the more difficult for us to define this whole engagement piece while rooting our culture somewhere in the equation.
Yes, that is true, but we do have a lot of very interesting global benchmarks. Let me quickly mention just two of them.
Mm.
One around one of the most important things without which we can't survive every day, which is food. I mean, one of the first descriptions of culture was a
Sitting
culture
around sharing food.
is geography, because what you eat, what you wear, what you do through the day, it depends on how are you surviving in the environment that you are in the middle of.
Mm.
So
Mm.
there are only certain things that are available to you to eat. Now, Google does brilliantly on food. However, as the director of technology, Thomas, explained, that was a very conscious strategy, because if you make available any cuisine that the young person wants, they are going to likely come and sit next to somebody whom they haven't met earlier. And hopefully they will have a conversation. Hopefully they will get to know what the other person is doing, so that, and where it helps is in this weak ties, where you're doing a project and you suddenly recollect that this person has already done something interesting, or their team is, so you reach out and you talk to that person. You get a whole load of information and understanding, which would otherwise have taken you an enormous amount of time to be able to gather on your own. And so this cross fertilization of ideas and effort helps Google immensely, and it's so much more valuable, maybe 1,000x, with respect to the cost that Google is additionally incurring for ensuring this. Now, every organization, of course, will have a different approach to it.
Mm.
But I do not, food is very important to all of us. I see no reason why that should not be a strategy for most organizations to, even if you're not footing the bill, can you not help organize, for example, healthy food options for people who are kind of on a diet, very conscious, etc., or have a potpourri of, your 29, 30 states in every place in India has a different cuisine. If you just have one place's cuisine served on one day, nobody's nobody's going to complain. That much I can tell you, because they'll say, okay, this I didn't like maybe all that much, but there is hope for tomorrow. There is something different coming along. Yeah. I'm saying we don't even think about using it as a mechanism for building engagement and it is a cultural piece.
I'll just add an experience that we had when we were consulting with a company in Dubai, which had a predominant percentage of people from Kerala, and they had this Onam Sadhya.
Ah, okay.
Remember? And we were doing a closed group discussion with a lot of employees.
Mm.
And if I remember right, there was a small yet significant percentage of people from Philippines. And they said, yeah, Onam is such a big festival, but nothing that they serve on this huge plate, huge leaf, plantain leaf, kind of suits our taste. And it was so easy to go back and talk to them, and they said, "Oh, that's so we can add a couple of dishes that are speciality from Philippines." And suddenly,
Delight.
the entire Kerala community and the Filipino community, they said, "Yeah, Onam is great."
Mm.
So food, surely, I mean, what unlocked there was the food once again. So yeah, just thought of that example
Figure
while we
out
were talking
sharing
about that.
food is the biggest human cultural trait. And,
Mm.
and so that's a wonderful example. Let me talk about then the next one, which leads into one of the most important things an organization actually does, which is play. All mammals, most mammals, learn through play in their in when they are young. They they master their body through play. They will try and do a
And,
compact.
and we're not counting office politics as play for sure.
That will be the default one. If you kind of create enough grounds for play to happen in
True,
the normal
true,
way.
true.
The simplest
Mm.
one is you have four houses and have them do a competition with each other and keep it running through the year or whatever. You know, sure, there will be some people who will be more focused on that badminton game in the evening,
Oh,
the work in the
yes.
morning. But hey, that's great as well. You got to figure out better ways to engage them at work as well. Uh, because it's only play that is exciting them. And the play also can be designed to have to do with the work itself. That is
Gamification.
where another piece of learning and development, which is apprenticeship, comes into play.
Mm.
The
Mm.
European practice of these guilds, where you had to apprentice under a master, very badly paid, abused. But if you wanted to learn and if you wanted to be considered an artist or in your own right or a professional in your own right, you had to go through that passage of time, longish time, where you were underpaid, underfed, overworked, etc. Now we can change all of that, right? We can have great apprentice. And a lot of organizations do try to do that with appointing a mentor for every new person who comes into the organization. And what is lacking is a thorough, thought through approach in so that this person is handheld, is mentored by what we talked about, Sigma males. What strikes me is that the organizations use a very simple metric. They say, okay, we have 10 new people, we'll find 10 managers and assign them these mentees. No, you have to find who
The match.
you have to, there are diagnostic tools which are available to figure out not everybody can be a good mentor. They may be great maestros, but they may not prove to be the best mentors. So you have to make that effort. You have to go down a little deeper than the superficial to be able to create and utilize this mechanism of play in multiple ways in work, in terms of engagement, in terms of activities, in terms of other things. So that's the second very important piece that I thought I would share. Back to you. If you have any questions, I can quickly tell you the others as well.
Very interesting. I mean, see, we are at the 35-minute mark,
Hmm.
and uh, there surely seems to be a lot more to this
That's right.
cultural engagement than we just saw.
Hmm.
So I think it only makes sense that we continue this conversation for the next episode as well. Because one thing is very clear that this has a far more it has far more impact on the growth and journey of every individual who's part of an organized setup, um, which every business leader, founder, HR practitioner, head of HR needs to be aware of. Because the default in terms of mathematics, in terms of design, surely is not something that's going to help you propel towards the right direction, right? So, so much more to talk about. So, how would you want to summarize the couple of points that you presented today before we pick it up in the next episode?
Sure. So the way that I would summarize this is that don't look at culture only from your organizational lens and only from the individual's lens. Look at it in the light of the human heritage that we have, of being designed to work together. And there are a lot of elements in that we need to take cognizance of and either incorporate through thoughtful design into our practices in the organization, or to have alternatives around that. For example, another one is tribing. We want to become a member of a tribe. How I see this in today's organizations is that if you are a professional, you dress in a particular manner. You look at a person, you will know that this person is an IT professional, this person is a finance professional. There are a lot of badges that we wear. For example, I understand if you're a very successful trader on Wall Street, then it's a red Ferrari for you, yeah, that you need to show off, or the kind of laptop bag that you're carrying will differentiate you from where you're from, what kind of an organization is it. I think they call something like a bulge bracket firm or something. I do not understand that, but yeah, there's a particular brand of clothing and watch and other accessories that you dress up in, which it's a kind of a uniform. It's a kind of showing that I belong to a particular tribe. I remember there's this firm, a consulting firm, which used to give these very good looking, very well designed baggage tags with your name and the firm's insignia on it. And so I know that people used to value that immensely, because you put it in your baggage tag, you're waiting at the baggage retrieval conveyor. And when your bag comes and it has this tag, and you want people to notice, and people notice, oh, so this guy is working with this kind of a
Association. Yeah.
management consulting or strategy consulting firm.
Mm.
And all of that, the paraphernalia around that. So there is a tribalism that we still need. How do we demonstrate our sense of belonging to an organization or to a group? And I think it is underutilized. So back to you, I would say that there are all of these potential either avalanche points, or if you're thoughtful, they can be your leverage points where you can build an enormous amount of engagement. If you understand what's the cultural baggage, what is the cultural legacy, what's the cultural ethos, what are the cultural practices in the group of people that you're bringing together under your organization's umbrella, and which one of these would you want to kind of take, promote, build on, and create. You could also create different things, because the space allows you to do that. And you put in place something which is better. One of the things that I'm noticing nowadays is that instead of giving flower bouquets, organizations are giving potted plants. And instinctively, people kind of feel that this is so much better. So when you do something that is better, it's clearly better than what was the default setup, it's easy to transition into it. It's easy to build a culture around it. So
Very interesting. Very interesting. So we started the conversation saying that the coming of age rituals are important because they're deep rooted, and organizations also need to become more aware of that. There is one format which is baptism by fire, where you make it difficult, and then they jump across the hoop, and then they become a part of the tribe. Or the kid glove approach, where you make it really easy for them, and there is a one-on-one connect people develop over time with the organization, and that's fun. And you said, why not both? Why not the best of both? And I think the driving point in today's conversation is this planting this whole thought of building a tribe where people look out for each other. When people feel that they are a part of it, they want to be a part of it, and it is something that's worthy of putting in that effort to become a part of. So I think that is enough food for thought for today's conversations in Humans of HR. Thank you so much once again. Absolute pleasure talking to you as always. And not actually planned, but the way the conversation kind of rolled out, I think this surely would call for another episode, maybe two, to help us chart this out for everybody associated with the world of HR to understand engagement better so that we are able to leverage culture to bring people together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Harish. Bye-bye.
See you all in the next episode. In the meantime, please do what's that order? Click, like, and subscribe. I think that's the order. Please do that so that we are able to connect with more people working in the same plan. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode, everybody.
Thank you.